Now we have a keynote address by Mr. Abhishek Singh, IAS, President and CEO, National E-Governance Division, Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, Government of India, on the topic Collaborative Innovation is Key to Resilient Digital Transformation 4.0. Over to you, Mr. Singh.
It's in my honor and privilege to be speaking at the Economic Times CIO Spectrum event. And it's indeed heartening to see so many experts from the digital technology field and all sharing their insights with regard to where we are in our digital transformation journey. When we look back in the last 1 year, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic and thereafter and the resurgence of the second wave in India, we've been seeing that digital technologies have been playing a more important role in all our lives. What we are seeing is that work has transformed, like the way we used to work within the government or the private sector or the corporate world. People have started adopting remote working as the default form of working. So there's been a demand for collaboration tools, and there has been a demand for video conferencing solutions, and there has been a quicker adoption to those tools, because otherwise during lockdowns and all, it would have been difficult for the continuity of normal businesses, for government to perform its role. And it was indeed very surprising that how quickly governments across the country, not only in the digitally advanced states like UP, like Tamil Nadu or Maharashtra or Gujarat, but even states like UP and Bihar and Northeast and all, they all adopted to digital technology. So that's been like one advantage that we see in the COVID-19, the effect of COVID-19, in spite of the large damage that is done to our economy and to people and to lives and everything else. The second thing that we see is that the impact of COVID-19 on healthcare, on education. Like the online education became the default. Like more and more students, like when the schools have been shut for almost a year, board examinations have been postponed. But when we see that more and more schools and teachers and children quickly adapted to online learning, and therein we come across like another dimension of the problem, that while the public schools and cities, children in cities and upper middle class families were quick to get access to a device or a laptop or a tablet and also have good reliable connectivity, but not everyone is so fortunate. So we saw how digital divide was playing up in there, and it impacted learning, it impacted the kind of education that are being imparted in the rural areas. And I'm sure with the new education policy giving a thrust on digital education, that will be a problem that we need to address in the days to come. Like, how do we make up for the lost learning? How do we ensure, even though we have promoted kids from one class to the other, but that doesn't solve the problem. Like, one may go from class 5 to 6, but how do we ensure that the learning concept that was required is still retained? So can we think of making digital tools of learning more ubiquitous, make tablets accessible, low cost devices, or convert classrooms to smart classrooms? So that's the kind of impact we are seeing in the field of education. Healthcare has been, of course, the biggest sector that has been impacted due to COVID-19. And there also what we found was that immediately after the pandemic, the people started using telemedicine like never before. Telemedicine has been there with us for a very, very long time, but the speed at which it was adopted was phenomenal. We saw the e-Sanjeevani platform developed by CDAC in collaboration with Ministry of Health gain more than 50 lakh users in no time. And that platform has now been scaled. It's available in across all the country, almost all the states, and more people are doing OPD consultations through eSanjeevani opd.in. Then we saw development of tools, digital tools like Arogya Setu, which came in very handy in the first phase of the pandemic, wherein it helped in tracking the Bluetooth contacts or tracking the infections that was spreading with the COVID-19 virus. As we know, COVID-19 virus takes some time to show symptoms and sometimes may not show the symptoms. So in case somebody has come in contact with somebody who has been tested COVID-19 positive later on, the application was able to give a warning, give an alert, let people know that yes, you have come in close contact with somebody who has been tested COVID-19 positive, and this information was shared for the last 15 days. So the probability of getting infected would remain because somebody has come in contact, and Once the Arogya Setu app showed a yellow color or an orange color indicating the Bluetooth contact, then one could take necessary precautions, one could stay home, and one could go into isolation, and thereby ensuring that we could break the chain of spread of the virus. The solution like Arogya Setu helped in tackling the COVID-19 pandemic also pointed out to the opportunities that lie for healthcare companies and for them to innovate and to offer solutions in this field. We saw emergence of a lot of such products when telemedicine and online pharmacies became the norm. We saw investments coming in companies like NetMeds, PharmEasy, 1mg, Practo. So all these companies started offering solutions to people. So what it required was that how you can realign your strategy, especially tech companies, in being in designing products that can be offered to the services which are in demand. So we saw a lot of health service providers coming in, a lot of hospitals seeking tech support, and they created opportunities for these solutions. The other big transformation that we saw with this kind of approach was the increase in demand for cloud services. So what with more and more digital projects being taken up, more and more digital transformation initiative being taken up, we found the huge demand in cloud services. We saw various government departments going developing their solutions on Azure or AWS or other cloud service providers. We saw private corporations adopting technology enabled solution, creating opportunities for that. So every organization was required to think what are the things that we for which we require to come in physical contact or come in a physical office, and what are the sectors for in which we can offer services remotely without actually coming to a physical space. So it had a huge impact. Like when we saw work from home coming in. In fact, my own team is still in work from home mode, and what we realized that the output of the organizations, and not only mine, but I saw that in many other corporations, the output of employees in a work from home environment went up, and they were able to go to their native places, start working from them, collaborate using collaborative tools, and they could save on their rental incomes, and their approach to work also improved because they were able to take care of their families or anyone and also contribute. So organizationally, it meant that your workforce became more diverse. People were coming in from remote locations, and the income dissipation which was happening, like if people who are working for a TCS or a Microsoft, if they're working from several parts of the country, especially the tier 2, tier 3 cities, then their disposable income in these cities goes up, and that leads to a greater demand of other services in these locations. And we will suddenly find that when professionals start working for remote locations, then demand for online services, e-commerce, food delivery, all of it goes up. So that becomes a positive sign for the economy, and more opportunities come in the smaller cities also. So that becomes very relevant. The other thing that we observed was that when we are adopting digital services, there is a huge demand for language localization in services. Because very often, if we design a solution, an app, or a portal only in English or Hindi, it doesn't serve even half of the country. So, in order to reach to the last person, adoption of languages became very important. So, what especially with in our initiatives also at MyGov, we realized that we were not getting traffic from the southern states. So, we tied up with a company called Reverie, who helped set up our portal in almost 8 languages, and that ensured that the content that we are doing for COVID communications went to more people across the country. So that was again another feature that we saw. Similarly, when we started the Umang app and we started services in 13 languages there, we found a greater adoption of that. And in the Umang, which is a mobile app which delivers services for various government departments, we saw that the number of people signing up for that app went up from almost 20,000 per day to 80,000 now. So once you adopt language technologies, it also helps in more inclusion, in ensuring that more and more people are able to access your services, and in expanding our outreach. Now, of course, what we are trying to do is to go beyond even language, and we found that conversational AI services are in a huge demand. Like other than CRM, if those companies who are adopting AI solutions for conversational AI, they are able to cut costs and they are able to serve their customers better, and you don't need to spend a lot of money on a full-fledged human call center, and be able to address many of these concerns through these AI chatbots that are there now. And with the voice enabled chatbots coming in, and that also we are incorporating several projects, like how can people talk to their apps, and how can they talk to their solutions just like they talk to an Alexa or a Siri. So that would ensure a larger outreach. Even people who cannot type, who cannot read, who cannot write, can also access services through voice interface. So that's again another shift that we are seeing happening in the overall digital space that we see. Then when we look at like in what ways it impacts, so one has to, the one lesson that we have learned in the last 1 year, and in fact not only government but various corporations, is that how do we be prepared for such events, how do we prepare ourselves for such shocks, how do we ensure that whatever businesses we are in can continue even when there is a disruption in say supply chain, in disruption in people coming to physically to offices, how can we have redundancy built in. So those are the strategies that has really helped. And now today we find that if we are able to create more sources of revenue, like for example, if we are looking at our managing our supply chain, and because of a lockdown or because of certain restrictions, if those lines are blocked, do I have an alternate source of getting our essential supplies to ensure that my business doesn't get disrupted? Do I have invested in sufficient connectivity? Do I have sufficient bandwidth? Do I have sufficient contracts in place in order to ensure that my work will continue even when such a disruption is there? So that requires companies, and that requires corporations to think about that and ensure we are able to be resilient, we are able to 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 continue our work as we would have done otherwise. Then another factor that we look back, when we look back, especially in the light of pandemic, we found that innovation is something that really drives growth in any sector that we are working on. Like when we launched several innovation challenges in the last year for various solutions, like video conferencing was one challenge that we faced, and we saw that we required homegrown video conference solutions, and we were thinking whether there will be any or not. We were surprised to find there were 2,000 companies, startups who had solutions ready-made to offer to that. Some of them have been developed, they have been deployed, they are being used by government, and that really helped us in sourcing solutions for that. When certain apps were blocked for violating the laws, the data privacy and the security laws of the country, then we found very quickly the startups and tech entrepreneurs designed solutions that could fill the void that was there. So we had a coup which could play the same role as Twitter. We had other companies which were coming in, a Share Chat, a Chingari, a Moj, who occupied the space that was vacated by short video platforms when TikTok was not available. So such opportunities arise in such atmospheres, and we see that the startups and tech entrepreneurs innovate quickly, design products, and offer that. And that has been a key strength of our country, the strength that we have in our technical manpower, and the way we are able to create solutions, create companies. And one very interesting fact remains that in spite of the pandemic, we had more than 20 unicorns last year. And this year, even though we are only in May, we have already had around 14 unicorns. So the world also sees India as a place where tech entrepreneurs are there, where businesses can be incubated and value can be created. So that's again a sign that innovation really helps, and that rides on the strength that we have in our country. Then one very important factor that I would like to mention is that going ahead, we need to adapt to the new normal. We need to understand that this kind of work environments will continue. Hopefully, we will be able to vaccinate the entire country by the year end. But even then, since the virus is mutating and we don't know what strains will come, I think some things will continue. And there's a lot of value that has come from remote working, working through collaboration tools, joining hands, public-private partnerships. In fact, the whole example of the CoWIN platform or the Arogya Setu app about which I spoke also shows how government and industry can collaborate, join hands, and work together for solving problems that impact both of us, not only government but also the private sector. And that has been a learning in the past year. And even our Honorable Prime Minister has several occasions, even in the Parliament, recognized the role the private sector plays and how it can work together to solve problems. Even in the recent oxygen crisis, when we found that a lot of hospitals did not have oxygen, the way the entire industry, the entire manufacturers of industrial oxygen, and the way the transportation, logistics companies came together in the government, so within 10 days, a world-class portal was set up, and we were able to monitor every transportation unit for oxygen that was moving from across the country. So collaboration, innovation, and working together are going to remain with us. And I'm sure with that kind of approach, we will be able to address the challenges that lie before us.
Thank you, Mr. Singh, for an engaging session. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a leaderboard feature on this platform. The leaderboard is where you will find your points earned. You can earn points by inviting friends to the virtual conclave, sharing the conclave content, and rating the sessions, visiting our partners' booth, downloading useful content, watching informative videos, and taking part in surveys or chatting with our experts. At the end of the event, you will get attractive gifts on the basis of the points earned during the conclave. Enjoy the seamless experience and stay tuned for the next session.